If you're finishing the seams of your lightweight fabrics with a serger, I need you to stop. Not because it's wrong, it totally works. And I've been doing it that way for years. But what if I told you there's a method that makes the inside of your garment look just as good as the outside? And once you see how easy it is, you're going to wonder why you ever did it any other way. Today, I'm sewing French seams step by step, and then I'm putting them to the test with my new summer blouse because sheer fabrics do not forgive a sloppy seam. You don't want to miss it. Hi, I'm Tony, and this is So Lounge. Now, I do not often sew with sheer fabrics. This is some gorgeous Trina Turk voile that I bought at Mood New York. And when I found this simplicity pattern in the mystery pattern box #2, I knew that this was the perfect fabric for this blouse. So this is Simplicity 7708. This is circa 1997. And I'm going to be making it with the longer sleeve minus the cuff. So I think that's going to hit bracelet length more or less. And this voile is the perfect lightweight summer fabric. It's 100% cotton. You can see that it is kind of sheer. And so when I was cutting out the pattern, I was looking at it thinking, I'm pretty sure I could sew this with French seams. Because here's the thing about French seams. The way that you sew them, they work better with straighter seams. And while I've seen people put French seams into sleeves and finish them while they're sewing them, that is not a skill I have. That is not in my wheelhouse. So if you can do that, this video might not be news to you. But for those of us who do not sew French seams and who are a little apprehensive because they do require some pre-planning and a little bit of prep work, we're going to just jump right in. I have my pattern pieces all cut out, and because this fabric is a little bit busy, I know, surprise, all my fabrics are busy. I made a little sample that I'm going to show you how to use and practice making French seams. So I just have this scrap of fabric. It has a print on one side because the thing about French seams is you start with the wrong sides together and then you flip the fabric so the seam goes to the inside before you sew the outside seam. Don't worry if it seems like a lot, we're going through it step by step. To just get started, I have my machine set up the same way I always do. I'm gonna do 2.5-inch stitch. I'm gonna put my needle down. Just have a little sample of fabric here. This is, if you wanna make your own, it's about 7 inches long. And what I did was mark the 5/8 inch seam allowance on my fabric. So I just drew that on with a heat erasable marker. When you look at instructions for French seams, first of all, they're not going to usually be in the big four patterns. I have yet to see a French seam as a suggestion, which is one reason why I rarely sew with them because I don't think about it until I'm like kind of halfway through the project. And with French seams, you need to think about them from the beginning and make sure that your fabric and the pattern pieces are appropriate for French seams. But we'll get to that once I move on to my actual garment. For now, what you need to know is mark the 5/8 inch seam on your little scraps, and you want to have the wrong sides together. So I've got wrong sides together, right sides to the outside on both sides, and I have my outside edge lined up. Now, if you look at a vintage pattern book to see the instructions for French seams, and I did double check my Vogue sewing. This is from 1973, so this book is actually older than I am. This was my friend's Janelle's mom's book, and I use it as like a reference because it's fantastic. So this is the second edition. The first edition was printed in 1970. This is an excellent book. If you can find this at a half price books or a book resale place, go check it out. This one is better than some of the newer versions, so I will say that. So when you read about the French seam, it says it's well suited for sheer fabric, so it works well with voile. It also would work well with chiffon or anything else that's lightweight and semi-sheer. So it looks like a plain seam on the outside and a neat tuck on the wrong side, and you use it generally with straight seams, or the straighter the seam, the better. So you want to pin the wrong sides together, which we have already done, and then you want to stitch 3/8 of an inch from the seam line. Now, I don't know why they had to make that complicated, because you could just say, sew 1/4 of an inch from the outside edge, and that makes more sense. So if you've tried this and it hasn't worked, maybe that's why. So that's what we're gonna do first. We're gonna sew at 1/4 of an inch, so that's 2/8, So we're 2/8 from the outside edge, and then we're 3/8 from the 5/8 inch mark, and that's a quarter. And so I'm just going to line up the outside edge of my presser foot with my fabric because that is at a quarter of an inch. And then I'm just going to sew my seam. So I'm lining up the outside edge, which isn't perfectly lined up, but that's okay because I'll trim that off. We're going with the top piece. It slipped a little. So I'm sewing a quarter of an inch from the outside edge, which is 3/8 of an inch from this side. So if you look at the instructions, it's going to say sew 3/8 from the line, and that's where we're going to be. And then that's actually at a quarter of an inch from the outside edge. So just to put that into perspective, that makes a little bit more sense to me. So I'm thinking it might make more sense to you. So my needle is down and I'm ready to go. I'm just going to stitch this. No need to backstitch or anything. So this is what it looks like. You can see where the seam line is. So next step is going to be to trim this seam close to the stitch line. You do not want to go through the stitch line. So to do this, I'm going to use my pinking shears. You can use whatever you want. I've tried this out with pinking shears and I like it better. I feel like I can get a little bit closer to that edge without going through the line with my pinking shears. This is also because my fabric is going to be voile, which is very lightweight and it's on the ravelly side. I think that the pinking is going to help prevent further raveling in the construction process. Now we have our nice neat pinked edge. And next, we're going to fold fabric. We're going to give it a press. Now you can use a little roller like this, one of these face rollers. I think I got this at Walmart. I'm not sure. It's horrible for the face, but it goes great for pressing seams. So you want to roll out your seam with one of these, or I'm going to head over to the ironing board because technically that's what it says to do, is to press it with the iron. I'm just using my mini ironing board on the tabletop. And so you can see that I rolled it first to get that. We can do this with a nice little press. It's a little bit of steam. Okay, press to open that seam. Let's do a little better job at this edge. Now I'm just going to fold it over. I'm going to kind of just pinch it along the seam allowance here. So I have a nice crisp little fold. Right, so you can see we have it's nice and folded. Because I used heat erasable pen, my red line has disappeared, but that's okay. So now we're going to head back to the machine. All right, so now we want to sew at 3/8 of an inch. That is the remaining amount of the seam allowance we have, which is going to put it to this one outside of the presser foot. I'm going to use my seam gauge so I do not forget. This means that the seam allowance is going to stay at 5/8 of an inch because we do not want to leave more seam allowance in the garment because that's going to affect the fit. If you're using an indie pattern, adjust accordingly. All right, so that's what it's going to look like when it's finished, which doesn't look like that much, right? Look how nice and neat it looks when we open it up. So from the outside, it just looks like a regular seam. Yeah, what's happening on the inside? Look how nice that seam looks. And the thing about this works great for sheer fabrics. You do not want to use it for thicker fabrics because it creates bulk in the seam that you might not want. All right, let's go put this into practice with a real garment. So when you sew a French seam, you have to plan your garment accordingly. And like I said earlier, you want to use lightweight sheer fabrics for this. It just tends to work better. There is less bulk in the seam than if you use heavier weight fabrics. So this voile is perfect for this experiment. Now, the other thing is that you want to have mostly straight seams. So in this top, it is a raglan sleeve, first of all, so that means it's going to be easier to put in. It is mostly straight. There's a tiny bit of curve at the bottom, but I think we're going to be okay. And then it has a totally straight seam down the side. So those are the only two seams that we will be finishing with a French seam, or rather we'll be sewing them with a French seam. The neckline just folds down and then it turns into a casing, and then the hem is just folded up and finished like a regular hem. Now, the thing is, when you do a French seam, you have to look at how the garment is constructed and adjust accordingly. So this is something that may also throw you off a little bit. The pattern instructions want me to put this together differently than the way that I need to put it together for French seams. So the way the pattern has me putting this together is sewing the sleeve into the top, then finishing the neckline, then finishing the side seams, okay? I don't wanna do it that way. I want to sew the sleeve in first, then I'll sew the side seam, and then I sew the neckline because it's gonna be harder to make this side seam happen after I've already got the whole neckline all sewn together because it's just gonna get confusing. It may work exactly the same, and if you can wrap your head around those steps, go for it. Like, totally do it your way. But for me personally, I think it's gonna be easier. I'm gonna be able to keep things straight if I sew the sleeve seam first as a French seam, and then finish the side seam as a French seam next before I move on to the neckline casing. So to do this, I need to grab a sleeve. I have my bodice front prepped. There's like a little V in the front, so I already did that part. And then I also made the elastic with the ties on it. So that's all ready to go. So once I get the sleeves in, it's gonna be pretty quick to get this finished. All right, so to get started, I'm going to be pinning the wrong sides together. So I need to got my sleeve here. I need to make sure I've got the right, yeah, that's the front. Okay, so I'm gonna match up the notches. I'm getting the whole seam matched up, including this curve down here. So in this part, we are doing what the pattern instructions say, but then we're going to jump ahead and finish the side seam once I get this sewn into place. Because this is a raglan sleeve, the way that it's put together is I have to sew the front part of the seam to the front bodice and then the back part of the seam to the back bodice. I think I did that right. Is that right? Yes, because the whole top is open for the gathering. So it's gonna look a little funky, but we're gonna make it happen. This is when it helps that you have a printed fabric because it's gonna be a little bit easier to see which side is the right side and which side is the wrong side for this purpose of pinning. So when you practice, it's a good idea if you use like a little scrap like I did that's kind of light colored so you can see where you're going and then still know which side is which. If you use a solid color fabric, mark one side as the right side, with a little X on all of your pattern pieces so you know which ones. Doing it along the seam line is also a good idea so that you know where things go because there's nothing worse than, having some color discrepancy because one side of the pattern piece is the wrong side and the other is the right side. So I have one sleeve pinned in. The way that this is put together is the arm seam gets put in first, and then you sew the whole underarm seam into the side seam. So we're gonna do that as a French seam next. So we're gonna see how this works. This should work in theory. I just have not done this before. So let's get that all happening. This is super thin voile, or voile, and so it is, my pins are falling out. All right, so I am just sewing this at the 1/4 inch for the first pass with the wrong sides together. So that's one side sewn. Now I need to flip to the other side. This is the front. This is the front of my top, and then this is the sleeve. So basically I'm sewing the left sleeve and it is sewn to the front and the back of the blouse. And so the seams are going to the outside, and now I need to trim them down with my pinking shears. And you may have noticed that the fabric is raveling a little bit. Pinking shears are probably the way to go with this. So hopefully this all works. If not, I have a little bit more fabric. I think I could recut this if needed, but hopefully it just all works out. If you're wondering, this is not something I do all the time. I have only made French seams once before for a pillowcase, and that was because the directions specifically said to use French seams, not because it was my own idea. It made me nervous because it's like blue through here and my thread's blue. I need to change glasses because I cannot see. Ah, so much better. Okay, I was like getting nervous there. I was like, oh. This idea is to get close, but not too close. And I do not want to accidentally cut any of my other fabric. I have that all trimmed. Let me do the other side. Then I will go to the ironing board and press. So now I am sewing at 3/8 of an inch. I have my right sides together, And I'm sewing along the seam that we just pressed. Same thing, just like the sample. All right, one side down, one side to go. I'm gonna sew the other side together and then I will press everything and we will move on to sewing these side seams of the sleeve and then the side of the front and back together. So I have my sleeve shoulder seams all sewn. I'm going to now press the finished French seam towards the sleeve. The same thing I would do if I was just sewing this regularly. Generally, the recommendation is to press the seam towards the sleeve before you finish that bottom seam. And so we're just going to do that same thing. That way we're getting everything lined up and ready for finishing the underarm seam and the side seam in combination. Okay, so my shoulder seam is all sewn together, and I have pinned the underarm seam together and the side seam together, right sides facing out. So I'm ready to go back in and do my French seam again. I need to move my little seam gauge because we do not need it. I'm just going to be sewing at 1/4 of an inch, just like before with the edge of the presser foot, and getting this underway. What's going on? You're fine. It's okay. No, it's not time to eat yet. Mama has to finish sewing this seam. Go lie down. Just a few more minutes, okay? My underarm seam of my sleeve, side seam combo is all stitched into place from the right side of the fabric. I am going to trim that seam down and then flip it to the inside and press it and sew it all up, and then we'll take a look and see how fabulous it is. My top is almost done. I just have to do the very last step of putting elastic into the sleeves, but they look pretty good as is. So let's take a closer look at the seams. Now that everything is finished, I have the whole neckline gathered in place and the hem is in. And these seams just look gorgeous. You can't tell that they're anything fancy from the outside, but we know what the inside looks like. This is also the first time I have worked with voile as a, main component of my garment. I have handled samples of it, but I've never actually sewn anything with it French seams are the way to go. This fabric is a loose weave and it ravels a lot. And by just finishing it with a French seam, it kind of keeps everything self-contained. It protects those seam allowances from any further fraying or raveling, and it creates kind of its own little seam finish ecosystem, which is going to make your garment last longer, and that's what we all want. When I was making the hem and the sleeves, I definitely had to contend with that, but they are all finished now. I just have to add some elastic in the sleeves, and this will be ready to wear. Now, I want to know, is the French seam going to be a new seam finish that you try out? It's an all-in-one thing. So while you're sewing, you're also finishing the seam. That's the best part. You get more bang for your buck that way. There is another great video coming up next. I know you're going to love it, and I'll see you over there.